Hello, it's Charles, and today I'm going to be replacing pretty much the whole drivetrain on my bicycle, which is a Giant Perigee, Perigee, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about chain stretch, change wear, whatever you want to call it, and I'll go over that in more detail. Alright, what I've got here is a very worn out chain. It's this bike is on its second chain, second rear cluster, original front chain rings, which you can tell are very, very worn. There's actually one missing just behind this crank. It's actually broken off. And what happens is when your chain wears, it's what people call chain stretch. It tends to get longer, but it's actually the components wearing out on the inside. And I'll get some video of some more close-ups of that later. But what we have here basically is the worn out chain, and I'll show you one of the things you can see if your chain is worn out. You can pretty much just put it on the big chain ring, grab it, and if it pulls out, that is not something it should do. A new chain will not do that, and that's why sometimes you would get your chain skipping, jumping, all that. Same thing on the back. I'll get back here and have a look at this. The sprockets on the rear cluster are also very, very worn out, and some teeth missing, all that. Like I say, once we get that pulled out, we'll have a close look at that as well. Some specialty tools we'll be using today. General bike tools and your general like. We're going to be using the Park Tool BB9. This will remove our bottom bracket and the little thing on the crank. It's a specialty tool for that. We'll be using this little tool to help get the chain rings off and on. And then for chain breaker, we'll just be using a chain breaker on the Topeak Alien, I can't remember if it's, yeah, the Alien 2. So, just going to be using that. What we're going to do is use this little wire gauge thing here they've got on the Topeak. You hook it up in here, hook it on the next one. That just gives you some loose chain to work with. There we go, our chain is broken. The pin is out. Take this out, make sure we don't lose that. Get that chain on out of there. Now get this crank arm off. Break these two bolts loose. Carefully, got little washers in there with them. Set those aside. And this one here. Piece that goes in there. Now we'll use this special bottom bracket tool. That part right there goes right in there. Screws that little piece out. And hopefully this isn't too gritty, grimy, seized up. No, slides right off. Look, there's a groove in there, so it only goes back the one way. You don't have to worry about it getting put in there crooked or anything. We use a soft-faced hammer. Let's see if we can't. Pop that on out the back. There we go. Our crank is effectively off of there. Now using the same tool, we'll hook that onto our bottom bracket, and on this side, the left side, counterclockwise loosens. Make sure you keep your spacers. You can see on this that it has tightened on this side clockwise, whereas the opposite side will be clockwise to loosen. Whereas we're looking at it this way, it looks like it's counterclockwise, but it's not. So it pops on out, nice and dirty and gritty. And then there again, keep track of your spacers to use later. To remove the rear cluster, we've got a specialty tool here, just a cluster removal tool that fits in there. Now if you just try to turn that, of course you're going to turn the back, so you have to have a chain whip, or you could actually use an old chain and a pair of vice grips. Well, make sure that's all there good. That comes off, and that just pops right off there. Alright, now I'm going to take the chain rings off to replace them. My lower chain ring, don't really use it that much, so I'm keeping that one, but I have to take it off to be able to get to the outer two. So I'll break these loose. And get those on out of there. Once again, holding on to all the stuff. And keep in mind that little bump there goes towards the crank arm. Now this is where later on this specialty tool will come into play to hook into there. Hold on to those nuts. And I think to break these loose, we'll basically just go to this side. Break them loose. You can see it spins without spinning the nut on the other side. should get these 4 taken out. Just take off the middle chainring there, and the outer chainring there. Then just the crank. Alright, we got the new outer chainring with the old one. You can really see the difference, especially here. We're missing a tooth and it broken off. You can see some wear on the teeth and everything, kind of sharpened up. So there's the new one. Same evidence here with the middle chain ring. Compared to the new one, you got a bit more beef to the teeth and everything. And especially with the rear cluster. Even got some gouged up teeth there compared to it's going to be the new one there. Definitely see some differences. And oh, this poor one here, missing a few teeth there. So worse for wear there. Now here we've really cleaned out where the bottom bracket goes. Make sure those threads are nice and clean. Get some more light up in there, see if you can see. Make sure you get all that grit and grime that works its way in there. Get that out. Then what we'll do is grease this up good with some grease. Get that new bottom bracket in there. Okay, we've got our bottom bracket area all nice and clean and lubed up. And remember to make sure you have the same spacers as you did on your original bottom bracket. Screw this one in on this side. And the other on the other. Making sure you don't cross thread them. I'm using the bottom bracket wrench. Snug up on that. There, the bottom bracket has been replaced. Okay, put your rear cluster back on. Might be hard to see in this view, but one of these little splines is different from the other. That one right there is smaller. And if you look on your new cluster, there'll be a matching spline that splines up with that. Now, it'll only go on that way. will go on any other way. But it makes it easier if you do line them up so you know where they are. So that one goes on. And likewise, these other tiny little cogs we're going to have the one that lines up. And using the special tool again. This time you don't have to use the chain whip because you're tightening. That's ready to go. Assembling these. Remember, you got this pin right here. That's made to go on the crank side, so you don't get your chain sucked down in there. And then this one, see, I have a little bump right here that lines up. Put one of the nuts. Let's get that started. And do the other four, or the other three of the four, I should say. And with all these, since we've had them apart, we've got them all cleaned up and a little dab of grease on there to ease an assembly, and if we ever need to take them apart in the future. This is where sometimes this specialty wrench comes in handy to hold the nuts on the back side, keep from twisting. But in this case, like it does sometimes, you don't even need that tool. They pretty much stay tight in there. Just tighten those up. And this side, back on the original smaller chain ring. Just like that, that's back together. And now we've got our bottom bracket in. This is just as simple as the opposite of taking it out, except you don't have to hammer it. A little bit of grease on there anyway. And something I didn't notice before, but there's a tiny little hole in here that when this goes on, lines up. And with that little, I don't know if you can see it there, but there's a little pin right there. So that lines up down in there once everything's together. Kind of like a keepsafe, keep it from sliding off. Even though you've got this piece right here. That's all on and ready to go. Alright, and routing the chain through here. Nice and greasy. Now, I've tried Shimano and SRAM before, but now I'm going to try the KMC brand, and they've got this link system similar to the Shimano. Nice and easy. Let's see how things go. All right, here's one of the things we talked about before with the loose or the worn chain and old sprocket. Here's a new chain, new front chain ring. You try to pull out on this, you can barely pull it out. Whereas the one we had before, there was lots of wear. Lots of looseness. Talk about chain wear, chain stretch, whatever you want to call it. We've got two chains. Top chain, brand new. Bottom chain, worn out. About 6,000 or 7,000 kilometers on this bottom chain. Now, when people talk about chain stretch, you can even see, keep looking at each link, and you can see this bottom chain tends to look like it's stretching, especially once you get over here. So, you can see with the bottom chain, there's quite a bit of play, some looseness. This top chain, you won't be able to do that. Flip sideways. You can see this one wiggles just a tiny bit. This one, the worn out chain, a lot. Here's something else to look at. You can actually bend a radius in that chain. Easy to do it on that one. That's about as much as you get on the new chain. It's quite a bit of worn out parts in here. You get another lens, I'll be able to show you even greater detail. Okay, here we've got, once again, new chain on top, worn chain on the bottom, and here's some components taken from these chains. Here you've got the new outside plate, which would be this part right here. And here the new inside plate, this part here. And the rollers, which are here, and the pins that hold everything together. And then here on the bottom, you've got, once again, outside plate, inside plate, and rollers. There's also a pin there. Normally where you see the wear are the rollers and the collar that the roller rolls on the inside flange. Now here on this bottom chain you can see quite a bit of wiggle. Let's see if we can zoom in on this. Still keep it in focus. And you can see there's a bit of wiggle there. On the top, the new chain, you probably won't even be able to see that. There is just you can feel just a tiny little bit of movement because it has to be able to roll. But this is where the sprockets and the chain rings are actually making contact. There will be some contact with the outside edges, but for the most part, this is where the weight and the energy is being put in on the chain. So let's see if we can see side-by-side comparison here. Worn out roller. This one wiggles some, like I said, not as much. And usually your wear would be seen right on this shoulder. Gets worn out. So right there, right there. Now, this wouldn't seem like much, but when you magnify it over the anywhere between 110, 118 links per chain, it will seem significant, and that's what wears out your sprockets a bit more. So, the big mistake a lot of people make is they just add more lube, and what happens is you get grit and grime from trails and roads and dirt and whatever up in here. And if you just add more lube, you're just attracting more of that grit and grime and getting more grit and grime in there to act as an abrasive to wear that out. Whereas you want to make sure you completely flush out, or as much as you can, flush out all that grit and grime using like a degreaser, solvent, something like that to completely flush out the system, blow it out with compressed air, whatever you can, and then get some more lube back in there. And you'll get people that use waxes and stuff and a dry lube so that it doesn't attract as much of your grit and grime. And then some of your like motorcycle chains and industrial chains will actually have a system of O-rings or X-rings to seal out that grit, grime, dirt, and dust. Keep it from getting in there and becoming an abrasive. So, there you have it. You can see a little bit of wear in there as well too. Not the best example of a completely worn out chain, but that's what does it. All right, I've taken apart the rear cluster and looking at the 15 and 17 tooth sprockets on the rear cluster. That would have been the, let's see, third and fourth sprocket in from the highest gear. Some of my, I guess, more used sprockets, more than I was usually in or changing to and from. And you can see on the 17 tooth there's 1, 2, 3 almost completely broken off teeth, and on this 15 tooth there's 1, 2, 3, 4 completely broken off teeth.